Hi there, listener. This is Iain, and welcome to episode 160 of the Ski Podcast. Now, this is a slightly different episode. Regular listeners will know that I like to promote sustainability, and I often have a focus on it on the podcast. Plus, I've curated a number of panels at different industry events, done ski show presentations about different aspects of sustainability. And you may know that I founded a lobbying group called Ski Flight Free, which encourages skiers to see if they can travel by alternative methods than flying, because that is the single biggest part of the carbon footprint of a ski holiday. Now, today is October the 31st, 2022. We're coming into this on the back of the hottest ever temperatures we've had in the UK, a very warm summer, a warm autumn. Sadly, we've seen glaciers melting at rates never seen before. The freezing level very high, where it's raining and not snowing higher up. And we know that we need snow to be able to continue to enjoy this wonderful sport that we love. So part of doing that is by reducing emissions. I thought the timing of this podcast with COP27 coming up next week would be quite appropriate. And so what I'm trying to do in this podcast is look at a lot of the positive work that's already being done out there. And this podcast focuses on 3 companies who are all taking sustainability seriously. They're different types and places in the market. I talked with Prue Stone from Hotelplan, who own Inghams Ski, Ceri Tinley from Consensio, which is a luxury chalet operator, and Al Judge from AliKats Mountain Holidays, who specialises in Morzine. So let's have a listen to those conversations and see what some companies are doing about sustainability. Okay, I'm delighted to be joined today by Prue Stone, who is Director of Sustainability at Hotelplan. How are you today, Prue?
I'm very well, thank you. Pleased to be here.
Thanks for joining us. I wonder if you just explain to some of our listeners who might not realise who Hotelplan are.
Sure. We are a group of 5 different adventure travel brands here in the UK. So we've got Inghams, Esprit and Santa's Lapland, and then we have Explore Worldwide and In Travel too. We're all focused on the great outdoors, basically, in various different ways, with slightly different demographics of customers, but all with that same passion, really, for outside.
Excellent. And long-time listeners will remember that I interviewed Joe Ponte, who is the Managing Director of Hotelplan, a little while ago. And I think both of you have come from an Explore background into the group. But the reason we're talking today, you mentioned specifically one of those brands, Inghams Ski, which I'm sure many people are familiar with if they're skiers. And I was at an event earlier this autumn called Listex, where I was talking to one of your colleagues, Harvey Gull, and I began to realise that actually Hotelplan have taken quite a few significant steps in their sustainability side of things. Not your appointment as Director of Sustainability notwithstanding. I wondered if we could just, cover a few of those things. I was running a panel about sustainability. One of my panelists was a chap called Charlie Cotton from Ecollective, and I discovered that you're actually working with them at the moment to do a carbon audit of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Charlie very well. He is elbow deep in our carbon, basically. He did Explores first, and that sort of is ongoing to a certain degree, as well as In Travel. And now he's looking at our 3 remaining brands, Inghams being one of them.
Excellent. And so is that currently work in progress, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. We started in August, and I think we want that to be wrapped up in November time. As with any big project, I think once you start to really understand the depth that you're going to and some of the complications. And I think within the industry generally, we are quite complicated, with old school with how we set things up and where we collect data and how we do things. A lot of things sit in people's heads. So it's a really good process to map things out and really understand what we're doing, where and why, and for us to be able to reflect on that as well as the carbon.
Excellent. And measuring it is the first point. I guess that would enable you then to educate consumers in terms of the carbon cost of different trips and different holidays. Is that right?
Yeah, the measurement is really complicated and quite long-winded at times, but it's just that starting point. What we do with that data is almost endless. So with Explore as an example, because they've started and finished that process, is every holiday has a carbon label. So we'd be able to do the same for Inghams potentially, or for any of the brands, is that as the customer pieces together their holiday, they can see how it builds. They can see if they add in certain elements or certain excursions, what it does to your data. How you travel obviously will become part of it. We're not there yet. We still have to do the measurement process. We have to do the reduction. but the communication around it is really important. That's going to be a very visual thing for the customer to see, but it's also going to come in time as a regulation from government, I expect.
Right. Okay. So the plan here is to stay ahead of the curve. And in terms of ski holidays, we typically find various research around the place suggests that 50 to maybe 75% of the carbon footprint of a ski holiday comes from flying if you're choosing to fly to resort. And you may know that I've set up a campaign called Ski Flight Free to try and encourage people to travel by other methods. I wondered if as a consequence of that you'd be looking to educate and or motivate your customers to travel by train, because Inghams, historically, one of the oldest ski companies in the UK, my parents definitely travelled by train with Inghams back in the 60s.
Absolutely. Train is going to be key. In the short term, we want to get more people on the network, but in the long term, the network itself has to be improved. The booking processes have to be improved. The whole concept of rail within Europe, I think, is a great opportunity, and it's something that we really want to be part of. But like you say, it's going to be critical for reducing our footprint. I think I'm estimating our aviation proportion to be about 80% of our footprint. It's big, 70 to 80%. And we need to know exactly how we can reduce by half by 2030, which is our commitment, and then moving on to net zero by 2050. Like, these are big stretches for us, but we are still tackling them head on, even though they're difficult.
Do you think you would look at chartering a train as Inghams used to back in the day? Because that's obviously a way, if you could shift a large number of people, and Inghams is quite influential, carrying a lot of people out to the Alps from flight to train, and that could make a significant difference.
We are all ears. These are conversations that we've had. These are conversations that we find difficult to progress for various different reasons. There's monopolies in this area, and it's a barrier for us. So we genuinely want to be able to get more people on train. At the moment, we are relatively limited. So I've done the trip out to the Alps 3 times this year by train, and I go London, Paris, Paris, Geneva, and get a transfer. We obviously want a direct option. We want the answers. We're willing to pay for the answers. Like, there's no scrimping around this. This is a genuine commitment from us, but we have physical barriers that need to be removed slightly.
Okay, well, like yourself, I also travel by train out to the Alps quite often. And I don't want to make this into a conversation about train travel per se. It's not so difficult, but it would be a lot easier to have a direct train or another direct train option in there as well. As well as the actual holiday side of things, my understanding is that you've also been looking at a lot of other elements of how Hotelplan and Inghams operate, including staff uniforms, for example, how staff move around, how your office is powered.
It's so big. Yeah. And that's the starting point, really. That when people think about sustainability, they'll often just think about climate, for example. And part of my role is to really pull that apart and make sure that the breadth of what we're trying to cover is communicated so that everyone knows about it, everyone's on board, but everyone can see that they have a part to play. So as important as climate change is biodiversity. So we need to work to invest in nature projects to make sure that we are trying to sort of balance our footstep a bit. Our staff are so important. We're really focusing on diversity, inclusion, the menopause, all these different things and ways that we can support different segments of our staff and our supply chain. We need to look at our suppliers, who we're working with. Do they have the same values? If they don't at the moment, can they come on the journey with us? Like, how do we shape this? And obviously our offices, but in the scheme of things, how we service our holidays is only sort of 2 to 5% of what we're looking at. So they're quite small, but even still, we've got solar panels on our roof. We try to clean without any chemicals. We try to minimize any sort of waste and water. We had our waste suppliers coming in to do talks with us to make sure that we understood what could be recycled and what couldn't and what we should do. So it's sort of unpicking this enormous web of actions that we can all take.
And specifically in terms of uniforms, have you changed how you're going about that?
Yeah, so we work very closely with Ski to really learn from experts about what we should be doing. So whilst I know a lot of the directions that we need to be going in. I don't always know every element. And I wanted to understand, is cotton better than polyester, or the polycotton mixes? Like, what are we doing and how do we do it? And who better? So the person responsible within our team, Gina, will speak to Rachael a lot from Eco Ski, and she will help us and provide that guidance and perspective that we need, as well as telling us which suppliers might be best suited for our needs. And it doesn't always work. I mean, that's been the learning, I think, for everyone involved in that we want to fix everything in a day. And several months later, we are still in the process of working out what we can fix and how. But yeah, absolutely. Our uniforms are deep in there because we want a fully sort of circular economy.
It is interesting. Regular listeners will know Rachael, I guess, because she's been on the show a couple of times before. And you mentioned as well about how that approach towards sustainability covers lots of ground. It's not, just the travel to resort, etc. Santa's Lapland is a big part of your program. I saw on the list of different things that you've been covering is an animal protection audit. I'm guessing that applies to that, does it?
It applies across all of those three brands within sort of Hotelplan, so Inghams, Esprit and Santa's Lapland, because Explore already have one and In Travel will soon. Because of the nature of the programme, it is predominantly relevant in Santa's Lapland, because we have such a focus on husky rides and reindeer rides and some of those lovely ideas that you have as what Santa and sort of that experience looks like. So we are building the protection policy, and it's a very robust policy, and we have it checked by biologists and academic experts. And we then will be bulking out this time with a real focus on Indigenous community. And that's where this is going to be really important, because we need to ask the people living there and hosting us what works and what doesn't, what feels authentic and what doesn't, and be able to make those decisions, which are going to be some hard decisions, accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, and it just demonstrates how the calculations are really simple. I was hosting a panel at the National Ski Snow Show at the weekend, where we were talking about different destinations off the beaten track. And while with all of these destinations we were talking about, it's impossible to travel there without flying. One of the things we touched on is that aspect that you talk about there of the benefits to the local communities that tourism offers. And so it's really a straightforward equation. Yes, you might be creating carbon by traveling to a destination, but equally, if you're helping to invest money into that destination as well and lift the standard of living for people, it's very hard to make those decisions overall. I found that very interesting that you had people coming into your office to talk about training in respect of waste, but I believe that you've also had sustainability experts come in to give the team training within your regular conference.
Recently we had a marketing conference, which perhaps you've heard about, and sustainability always forms a big part of that. And when the brands have their sort of brand days and they talk about their vision and their future, then it's always a big part of that. And that's how you can really embed sustainability from the top down as such. If you're having your MDs or your marketing directors talking and believing in it, and then having experts come in. So we did this particular time, we had a good friend and colleague of mine come in from university to talk purely about sustainable marketing, just to highlight some of the research that's been going on, as well as those tangible takeaways that you can have. And it's so important for expert knowledge to come in, but also for people to hear different voices, different perspectives. It's all part of our focus on education and training more widely. That's very interesting to hear, Prue. And I think you're putting together, a sustainability team. Obviously, you've been appointed into your position as well, and that audit will be completed at some point prior to the season. So let's keep our fingers crossed in relation to those negotiations over the charter train, because that would be so good to have that back again. There's certainly, I'm very aware, there's a willingness of people to travel by train if it could be a slightly simpler option. And otherwise, I look forward to touching base again, perhaps in 6 months to a year's time, to see how things have progressed. Absolutely, it sounds great. All right, thanks very much for your time today, Prue. Thanks for having me. Secondly, I spoke to Ceri Tinley, who is the founder and managing director of Consensio Holidays, a chalet company that operates at the luxury end of the market. Hi, I'm here today with Ceri Tinley, who is founder and managing director of Consensio Chalets. Hi, Ceri, how are you?
Hi, very good. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Well, thanks for joining me this morning. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is something I've become very mindful of this autumn is there really does seem to be a genuine trend amongst ski companies to take action over sustainability. And a number of the companies are taking it perhaps more seriously than others, and that's why I wanted to talk to you. You actually had a survey that Consensio Chalets released recently called the Luxury Ski Insights Report, and it said there that although quite a high proportion, 42% of companies aren't taking any sustainability measures at all, 12% were actually measuring their carbon footprint, and a number of others had set targets towards reducing emissions. And the reason I wanted to speak to you is Consensio have identified your footprint and are taking steps to reduce it. I wondered if you could just tell me, firstly, why you decided to actually measure your footprint in the first place.
We've been aware, obviously, as everyone is, that it is incredibly important to address the issues. And as a company, it's very important for all of our employees. It's at the heart of what we do, that we want to do what we can. We completely appreciate that luxury has often been written off as, well, you can't do anything because it's luxury and it's not possible. And whilst we completely accept that what we do is luxury and there are certain aspects that we can't change about what we do, it doesn't mean that we can't change the things that we can. And really, whilst we started a few years ago to write statements and make commitments, it was only really when we started talking to POW, which Protect Our Winters, that really helped us kind of get our heads around the fact that we can do something. We shouldn't just give up, and what we can do, and to actually set some targets. Now, this was a couple of years ago. However, we then decided to take it a little bit further, because change is fine, but how do you actually measure whether you're getting anywhere, or what you could change or should change or can change? And so this last spring, I was introduced to Charlie from Ecollective Carbon, and he helped us sort of guide us on this journey of actually identifying what our footprint was.
And in terms of measuring your footprint, it sounds like a remarkably complicated thing to do. It's look at what your starting point is and look at how you can reduce things from there. I guess there's lots of different factors without kind of getting bogged down into jargon, etc. You do have different elements that you can control and you can't control, scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3. I guess primarily you're focusing on scope 1, those elements that are immediately under your control.
Absolutely. Yeah. I won't say the easy wins, but the ones that we as a company can make decisions quite quickly and without too much of an economic impact and too much of an operational impact. That the easy wins. Why didn't we do this years ago?
And what were those easy wins then?
So some of the easy wins, everyone's been talking about, removing the single plastics, changing your bathroom supplier amenities so they're a slightly more sustainable source. Let's not be ordering our slippers in from China because it's cheaper. And, those sorts of things that actually are easy once you've just made the decision to do. They don't require a big economic input or the input of other suppliers or owners in order to make it happen.
And so you therefore calculated your kind of ground level point that you're starting from, the actual carbon cost of someone taking a holiday with you on a per guest basis. And I have a note here that says it's 784 kilograms CO2 equivalent, CO2e for a 1 week stay. Is that right?
If that's what Charlie has told you, that is correct. Charlie, he did an amazing job. He literally went through all the aspects of our business. Now, obviously, different properties have a different footprint, but we still felt it was important to have a figure that we could then at least measure year to year. So, yeah, that's the figure that it came up with. Mm-hmm.
And the goal is to reduce that initially by 7% a year.
That's what we, after discussion, is achievable to get us to our target. Sometimes this is not a linear process. It's an aim. Some years will be a massive jump. Initially, perhaps the first year would be a bigger jump. As we go forward, there are certain things that when you get into your scope 2, when you're influenced by external suppliers, for example, I would today change all our vehicles to electric. They're not produced. The multi-pert people, like we use the Volkswagen Caravels, they're not produced in an electric format. They will be, but we're talking 2026 really. So yes, our names are down, and that's where we'll be. So suddenly that year probably will have a massive impact. And so, but 7 is the achievable aim that we felt was a metric that we could use.
Yeah, and the goal is to reach net zero by 2035, right?
Correct.
And so you mentioned some things you can't access. I will actually send you an email because a very interesting, I don't know if you know the transfer company called Coolbus, who are based out of Bourg-Saint-Maurice. So just invested in some Mercedes minibuses, which are electric, and I think they're the first kind of models around that make that possible. But we'll keep that off the conversation right now. You mentioned scope 2, let's say, the chalets, and the impact of those. And in fact, when I looked at the breakdown, because you've got quite a good graphic, which I'll include in the show notes as well, which is an infographic, and you're looking at the breakdown of the carbon footprint in terms of where it comes from. The chalets themselves are the highest proportion, aren't they? I believe. Yeah. Assuming you don't own those chalets, you rent them off owners. Given it's such a significant part of the footprint, how do you persuade those owners to make the required changes to bring that down?
To be fair, some of it is guest led, some of it is owner led. I mean, France as a whole is generally quite sustainable. The biggest is obviously electricity, the power. But France, as you're probably aware, is relatively clean in its production, and so actually some of it is down to how the chalets are run. Some of it is down to a guest. We can't force all guests not to eat meat, for example. We can't. At the moment, our vehicles aren't electric. They will be. Do we stop burning wood in the chalets? So there are certain things. Now, yes, the owners, we can. I mean, even a simple thing of just reducing the power. This year, we're trialing dropping everything by a degree. The chalets, I don't know, you've been in chalets as much as most people. They are warm places, and especially ours, which tend to have swimming pools and big spa areas, are very warm. And we also want to light a nice fire with sustainably sourced wood, obviously. But dropping that 1 degree, it does have a massive impact. So yes, I agree. There are things that we need to persuade owners, but all our owners are on board with this journey, with what we can do, as long as it's economical and sustainable in what we're trying to achieve. So putting in electric chargers, so our guests that can drive out, absolutely, all on board, either are installed or in process. So I don't think we're going to face challenges from that front. It's just logistically, we're not going to change how a chalet is heated until it's appropriate that it needs to be renovated and changed the way it's done.
And that obviously is going to be a challenge. Some things are more under control, such as staff travelling out to the Alps. Are you looking to change things around so that fewer of your staff end up flying and more of them, travel by train, for example?
Absolutely. It's company policy that we have a priority system. If you can train, you train, and if you can't, then you can drive, or if you can then and so it's a tier. Now obviously there are certain things. I live on an island. I have to fly to get off the island in the winter. In the summer, potentially the ferry, but for me, I will be training from London to the Alps going forward. I need to fly to London, but from then it will be the train. And so that's what we're prioritizing. I mean, our staff are from all over Europe, so the majority of them, it's easy enough to train into France or to Switzerland now for our chalet there.
And in terms of clients, I think this falls into scope 3, for example, how they travel, because that's not part of your equations. Are you offering your clients any incentives to take alternatives to flying, or are you educating them in any way on the carbon cost of flying relative to other methods of travel?
So the primary focus of what Consensio provides is we provide a bespoke holiday experience. We don't dictate to our guests. However, I think the word that you used then of educating and allowing our guests to understand the options that are available is our focus at the moment, ensuring that it's easy for them if they do want to drive down, that we have parking, we have electrical chargers, etc. So it's facilitating and educating is our primary aim at the moment. Really, for our guests, they travel from all over the world. I think that we'll have far more success going this route than trying to motivate them to choose how we want them to travel to the Alps.
So how are you going to let them know about these options?
So we've already started writing blogs, sending newsletters, we organise every aspect of their travel. Sales team are on 24/7 to talk to them, to book everything. And so at that stage, they're talking to them, how are you planning to get to the Alps? You do understand we have this option. Yes, there's plenty. Most of our chalets can park up to 4 cars, so it's not a problem if you're wanting to drive down. And it really depends on from where they're travelling. We saw a big increase last winter of self-drives coming from the UK. That was significant. Now, whether that's a COVID thing, I don't know. However, there are people that will always private jet in. However, we're working with people. There's Snowdrone, there's some transfer companies, like you mentioned, that are providing electrical transfers, vehicles from Geneva. And so those are the options we're offering them when we say, right, do you want to transfer? Okay, yeah. You do realise these are options that are available to you. You don't have to just opt for a standard minibus. Why don't we get an electric vehicle to your chalet? So
I referred to the Luxury Ski Insights report earlier, and I noticed that it said in there that according to your survey, around 8% of customers are actually taking a private jet on these holidays. I haven't worked out the numbers, but I'm pretty sure that, a chalet of people taking a private jet is probably going to wipe out all the changes that you make as a company yourselves for a year.
Agreed. But I can't control what our guests do. We can inspire them, we can educate them. I can't say you can't come on holiday if you fly by private jet. Perhaps I could. But I think ensuring that guests understand the impact. I do think that guests are more and more aware. I think potentially in the last year, there was the impact of COVID, people not wanting to, if they could travel by private jet, go on commercial airlines. There was the whole hoo-ha last winter, flights being cancelled. Whether if you have the money, that was something that ease of getting to the Alps outweighed any sustainability, perhaps. I'd like to think that all guests are coming to the idea that sustainability is important, and how you get to the mountains is as essential as to who you choose.
For sure. Well, I guess, as you alluded to earlier, education is a part of it. So hopefully you'll be able to continue, sharing content on the blog when you're discussing with people some of these options. Firstly, I think it is admirable that you've actually taken the route to identify the footprint and to reduce it. We, as an industry as a whole, we just need to help educate people to understand that a simpler way, or the simplest way of reducing your footprint, is to choose, not to fly, like you're saying with your, staff taking the train. I mean, the day we're recording this today, Brighton at the end of November, and it's 20 degrees outside. And I noticed down in, the southwest of France, it's 30 degrees. It's basically summer temperatures at the end of November, and we've just had a whole bunch of races around Europe cancelled. However, positive news, I've been told it's going to be cold in November. If collectively we can encourage other companies as well to go down the route that you've done and actually measure a footprint and begin to reduce it and continue to educate people, hopefully we can look forward to a better future down the track. That's brilliant, Ceri. Thank you very much for joining me today. And, it'd be interesting to check in a year's time to see how things have progressed over the last year.
Look forward to speaking then.
Did you spot my deliberate mistake there? I said it was the end of November. It was really only the end of October. However, temperature's still very warm for that time of year. Now, my final interview was with Al Judge from AliKats Mountain Holidays in Morzine. Let's have a listen to that. Great. I'm delighted to be joined today by Al Judge from AliKats Mountain Chalets in Morzine. Hi, Al. How are you today?
Very good, Ian. Thanks. How are you?
Very good. It's great to have you back on the show before. We've had you on a few times in your role with Montagne Verte, the extremely good sustainability organisation in Morzine. But today I wanted to talk to you about AliKats and some of the measures that you've brought in for sustainability in relation to your own operation. I know you've always been, very forward thinking in this. So I noticed that AliKats achieved zero food waste last year, and that's a really difficult thing to do when you're running chalets. If you're cooking for 8, 10, 12 people, so hard to kind of get the quantities right. So I wondered how you have gone about achieving that zero food waste.
Yeah, so we kind of take a kind of holistic approach to the way that we manage food. So we have a permaculture garden here, where we grow as much food as we can. Obviously, it's tricky in the winter. But what we also have as part of that is a composting system. And part of our composting approach includes bokashi, which allows us to anaerobically break down any food products, which includes meat, cheese, dairy. And what that means is that all of the food waste that comes out of the chalets goes into these bokashi bins, along with some yeast. It breaks it down, and then we add it to the compost, and then the compost gets added back into the garden, from where we then continue to grow things. So that allows us a completely zero waste circular food system, and it's been really important to us.
Excellent. And you've also have your own chickens as well, is that right?
Yeah, that's the other part of it. So we have our own chickens. They will eat a good amount. They often eat leftover baguettes from breakfast in the morning, and that's the second part of allowing us to get to zero food waste.
Excellent. And you're waste neutral overall. So that sounds a lot more difficult to achieve than composting your food. How does that work?
So waste neutral is similar to the concept of carbon neutral. Basically, we work with a partner called New Cycle, and what we do is we offset. First of all, we measure all the waste that we create. Then we offset. We try and reduce it, and then we offset what we can't reduce. And the partner, New Cycle, they then work in initiatives that take waste out of the environment. So the idea is, at the end of it, we have taken as much waste out of the environment as we put in the first place.
Yeah, I will put a link to that in the show notes. That sounds like an interesting way of going about things. I know that you've got a couple of electric vehicles as well, because I was asking you for your input about an article I'm writing the other day. You use those around the resort?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, mostly they are kind of moving stuff up and down the resort.
Yeah, how have you found their performance in cold weather?
Absolutely no problems. To be honest, we never get anywhere near testing the full range. We charge it each night, and for what we need each day, it's absolutely fine.
I also noticed that you're kind of you've said that you're reducing the amount of meat served. And in fact, I think you're offering a discount for clients who choose to have a plant-based diet for the week. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's part of an overall kind of green incentive package. So if you travel to the resort via train and you opt out of the using a hot tub for the week, which is a pretty energy hungry thing to have going, and you also eat plant-based, then you can enjoy somewhere between 10 and 20% off. It will always be a minimum of 10% and maybe up to 20% in certain weeks of the year. Okay.
And so if you were not vegetarian or vegan, for example, will there always still be meat options on the menu?
Yes, there is. There's always meat options. There is one day day of the week where we do a vegetarian menu, but for people who are hardened meat eaters, we can always cook a chicken breast for someone. But what we're trying to do is we spend a lot of time creating a menu that's pretty incredible, and we're trying to show off the wide variety of vegetables and plant-based dishes. And we find that most of the time on that day where we do a kind of meat-free day, guests often come away saying it was their favorite meal of the week. So it's a kind of important part of what we're doing is to try and reduce the overall meat content by, showing off the best part of plant-based eating as possible.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that seems to be a good policy to me, because I read lots of statistics about what people's intentions are and how they want to be more sustainable, and reducing the amount of meat they eat is a key part of that. It's also one of the most achievable ones. And these days, I don't think it's that unusual to have a meatless meal, whereas back in the kind of original days of chalets, would be very considered quite unusual or even odd to be selecting a vegetarian meal, whereas these days it's kind of standard. There's so many meat substitutes available on the market that most people wouldn't even know. There's actually a vegan cafe near to me down here, which I go to on a fairly regular basis, and they do a BLT sandwich, and I almost feel guilty because it tastes and smells exactly like bacon, but it's not bacon. It's amazing. I wondered if I could ask you another question. You mentioned the hot tub there, so there's a possibility of getting a discount if you opt out of using the hot tub. And this is something that doesn't really get mentioned much within the ski industry. It's often used as a selling point. But I've always, wondered about the hot tub. It uses a lot of water and a lot of electricity to keep it going. I wondered if you could give any insight into that.
Well, yeah, like you said, it does use a lot of energy. Keeping water heated to 37.5 degrees when it's minus 20 outside is, it requires some power. And in addition to that, we've had in fact, we are still in a drought, a top level drought crisis that you can be in still in France now. And so 1,500 litres of water being flushed down the drains each week, it seems indulgent in the climate in which we're living in. So we're trying to incentivize people to consider not using the hot tub, and we're trying to give a generous discount to people to help incentivize that.
Okay, and are there any, you mentioned a drought. I'm aware that other areas of France are more badly affected than the Haute-Savoie where you are, but are there any regulations in place about water use at the moment?
Well, at the moment, you're not allowed to fill hot tubs. The expectation is that will be lifted as of the 31st of August, but that's been in place now. 31st of October. It's now been in place since August, so it will be a good 3 months that we're having to live with this. So you're not allowed to wash your car, you're not allowed to fill your hot tub or your swimming pool, and the various other parts of that regulation. But we're hoping that we've had good rain in the last couple of weeks, and I think by the end of October that will be lifted.
Right. Okay. Well, that's really interesting as well. And something else that you mentioned to me before we started the live conversation just now is that you're also offering your guests an opportunity to offset their flights if they fly out, rather than taking the train or driving this winter.
Yeah, sure. So we've worked hard on trying to reduce the impact of our operations over the last few years, but somewhere between 50 and 75% of the carbon emissions associated with the ski holiday come from the travel to and from resorts. This is what we're now trying to do. Now that we've kind of reduced the impact of our operations as much as possible, we're trying to now help our guests reduce the impact of getting to and from resorts. So we've introduced a voluntary carbon neutrality contribution, which is around €9. Well, it is €9 per person, and that basically would offset the average emissions associated with travelling from a European city to Geneva and then a minibus up to Morzine and back.
Clients can choose to opt out of that if they want to.
Yeah, it's entirely voluntary, and if they feel like they've travelled further and they'd like to pay a bit more, they can do that too. And then 100% of the proceeds go to Foundation Good Planet, which is which invests in projects that offset carbon in various places around the world.
Okay, excellent. Well, I've touched on offsetting before during my conversation with Helen Coffey. That's a separate podcast that you can listen to. That's brilliant, Al. Really enjoyed talking to you about that, and I wish you all the best for this winter. And I'll be really interested to hear, when it comes towards the end of the season, what the take up was from your guests in relation to the offsetting, and how many of your guests actually opted to get that discount by taking the greener options.
Sure, I'd be delighted. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right, that's great. Thanks very much for your time today, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Cheers, Ian.
So I hope you found those conversations interesting, stimulating, and definitely some positive ideas there for the future. I'm going to be covering more sustainability during the subsequent podcasts as we go on. There are lots of great initiatives going on. I'll try and do one focusing on what resorts are doing as well at some point. For now, I enjoy all feedback, so if you would like to let me know what you think, you can get in contact with us on social via @theskipodcast or email theskipodcast@gmail.com. We've got 159 other episodes to catch up on. Normally we get around 75 to 100 of those listened to every week, but for now I would like to thank Prue, Ceri and Al for joining me, and our next episode will be on the 14th of November. That'll be episode 161. It's going to be a ski boot special. I'll be joined by Al Morgan and Colin Martin. For the meantime, thanks for joining us today, listener, and until next time, goodbye.